everybody. Welcome to another webinar here at Route Consultant focused on the emergency medical services industry. Now, if you haven't been here before, haven't seen me, my name's Josh Gregory. I'm the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. All that means for you is that my goal here is to help educate you on a new space, new industry, and also just to continue to be a place that we can come together, learn from each other, and ask questions. Now, format-wise, the way this webinar works, if you've never been here, is we are going to go over some content, some updates, and then if there are any questions at the end, we will leave time for Q&A if anyone has anything. And it could be questions about what we talk about today or anything about the space as a whole. We're always here to answer those questions. And if you're watching on YouTube, you're not going to get the chance to ask live, but you can reach back out to us and ask any of your questions, info@routeconsultant.com. Or you can just join us on the next webinar. We're going to be here every week. Now, if you do have questions today and you do have anything that you want to type in, make sure you put it in the Q&A button at the bottom of the window. It's the best place for me to be able to see it and make sure that your questions get answered. Now, as far as what we'll be focusing on today, so if you were here last week, the conversation was all about the training and the certifications that you're really going to need to be successful in this space. And we've actually talked a lot over the last few weeks and months about all the things that you need to set your business up properly for kind of how to run things in the best of times, how to optimize. So what we wanted to focus on today is the other side of the coin. So how do you handle all the situations where things go wrong? We have brought Hans Fakir back on to help us talk through all of this. And again, if you have not met Hans before, this is another chance to meet him. We've got intros on him back on previous webinars and on our website, but Hans has a long history in this industry. He's helped people operate them. He's operated themselves. He continues to mentor people across the country today. So it is always a pleasure to have him on. So Hans, if you just want to say hi, and then we'll get started.
Good afternoon, Josh, and everybody out there in Route Consultants land. We appreciate you guys, and I appreciate Josh, you always having me in to help people make this transition or this step into healthcare a little bit easier.
Oh yeah,
So
that's the
yes, I'm
goal.
definitely
Yeah.
excited.
And I couldn't do it alone. We need you. So we need this expertise, Hans. So like I kind of teed it up, this is really about kind of talking through contingency planning on some of the scenarios that you hopefully won't run into often, but you should always have a plan for. So I'm just going to talk through a couple scenarios and then kind of hear your thoughts on how each of these might go. So let's just focus on kind of the first one here, which any logistics industry, you're probably familiar with this, but you wake up in the morning, you check your phone and you've got a call or a text or an email that the guy you thought was going to show up and drive for you today can't make it. So they've called out. What's kind of the thought process? What's the first thing that you do and think in those types of situations?
Cool. Great question. So my first year, when I first started, I strategically had my office less than a mile away from my home. Because again, this is why it's important for you as an owner to be an EMT, because that was my thought, right? If someone calls out, I could just jump them. I'm less than 3 blocks away. I'm right there. So I'm always looking at ways that how do I stop the bleeding? Meaning that if someone calls out, that you already know in your head that you're against the clock to get this patient on time. So initially, what I do is I will give someone, based on how far the patient is from our actual office, I'll give my employees enough time to get to work. So that way they can check the truck off and, get a cup of coffee and everything like that. But I noticed that me, always getting on the truck, of course, that gets tiring at 4 o'clock in the morning and so on and so on. So I realized that I also had two employees that were in the office that were my admin and my lead EMT. They weren't EMT, so they could not get on the truck, so they would just call me, right? I said, how do I fix this? Because if I'm always on the truck, then who's really helping the company grow? So the first thing that we did was we created protocols, and basically, if you have an office admin, you want to put that office admin into EMT school. At minimum EMR, best case scenario, EMT basic, right? They can become an EMT in less than 3 months. So now let's give that example again. That scenario. Someone calls out, they call my office admin. Now she can get on the truck. If two people call out, okay, the office admin goes to one truck, my lead EMT will go on the second truck. It would take three people to call out for me to have to get that phone call. So what I've implemented is making sure that I have everyone who is employed by me, they're actually EMTs. And now we have three contingency plans or two before it gets to me, right? Where now we have two people that can get on the truck and make sure that that we keep it going.
Yeah. And that's definitely key. If you can build those layers in, and they don't have to be exactly like you said, it can be back office people. It doesn't have to be someone who's driving every day, but if you need them, they're there to drive when you need them. And you know, what happens though if it gets to it? Like, let's say you get through all of them and you can't jump on a truck. Is there ever any kind of backup that you've ever found of being able to call in somebody?
Yeah, definitely. Now, I plan ahead, especially for holidays and weekends, right? So one of the ways that I found to minimize people calling out on the weekends is we do give pay differentials. So like if I'm paying someone, for example, $14 an hour for a regular Monday through Friday person, but if I have someone that's consistently working on weekends, then they get $2 or a dollar extra for working on weekends. So we incentivize the days that we feel people will call out, right? But in scenarios like that, where if I'm not available, then my lead EMT knows to call either a sister or another affiliate EMS company. So it's good building relationships with smaller or even larger private EMS companies that are located in the area that you need the help. So what I do is I strategically have a map in my office and it has other ambulance companies and it shows their location. And of course, I build a rapport with them, and same thing. They call me if they need me. I call them if I need them. Um, One of the first things we do also is also we make sure that we call the patient or and the facility.
Hmm.
So we try to stay ahead of the game rather than waiting until we show up late. We make sure that maybe they can put another patient in that patient slot, or they keep that slot open for them. So we do things like that.
Got it. Now, when you're talking about those relationships that you build, what's kind of the way that you go about finding those other EMS companies to speak with and starting that conversation?
One of the things you'll always run into is you don't see it now, but once you get into this industry, you are going to see a lot of EMS companies at the hospitals, at the dialysis centers, wherever you go, you're going to see them. So I always give my card to either the employee or and ask him or he or she to have the owner call me, or I'll reach out and just do a friendly, hey, my name is Hans. I'm Constant Care EMS. I noticed you're here. I'm in McDonough. Listen, call me if you ever need. And you don't get a lot of pushback because people are always looking to
Yeah.
build relationships with other people because trucks break down, flat tires, or you just might be running late for other reasons. So I always extend the olive branch. I always make myself known to other facilities and learn to work together.
Yeah, I think that's really important because when you think about this as being, a privatized space with, it's pretty distributed. When you talk about something like the FedEx or the Amazon side, there's a terminal where at least there's a place to meet people. But here, the terminal is the hospital. That's the place everybody's
Yeah.
going in and out of. And I think that's really smart to just keep that in mind. You're not just trying to build relationships with the hospital and social workers. That's a good place to meet people and be ready to meet people. Don't be lazy and say, hey, I'll do that next time. It can be as simple as what you just said. Here's my card. Call me if you need me.
And listen, I've had it. This is just so true that I've had on several occasions where someone will call me and literally the location where your truck is they need help right there. I'm like, I got a crew at that dialysis center right now. Give me the address, and they'll text me the address to the patient. We'll go help them out. That is so key, and it helps because hey, I got a crew stuck in traffic. Okay, where are they at? Where's the patient going? And so building those relationships, because again, if you're an individual, if you don't have 30 or 20 trucks, even if you do, but the chances of not needing help and you don't have a large fleet, you're always going to need someone.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very true. It's when you get that pride of like, hey, I've built this where I'm never going to need any help. That's when it's the day that it happens where you needed help. So yeah, I think it's never going to do you any harm to have backup plans and people that you can call and count on if it comes to the point where you need them.
Mhm. And I know you said backup plans. I always keep standby staff during the holidays and weekends. So I do have a standby roster, and they get paid um, if they don't get any calls, and they get paid if they actually get on the truck. So it's a bonus for them.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to what we've talked about multiple times over the course of these webinars, which is the most important thing is that you have some way of servicing these patients or these hospitals when they call so that your trust and your brand remains strong. And if it comes to the point where you can't do it on that day, even just saying that you can find a backup, that can still do enough to kind of salvage that brand damage and keep them from, viewing you as someone they can't count on.
Yeah, that's huge, Josh. Like the communication, and I tell my employees it's a domino effect, right? So if you wait to the last minute to tell me you're late, now we have to call the patient's facility, and now they're going to be late, and the patient that's coming after your patient. So let's stop the bleeding as soon as possible. As soon as you know that you're going to be late, you give your supervisor a call. We call the patient and or the facility and let them know and let them make the provisions right there and then. Because we don't like working behind the eight ball. So as soon as we could get ahead of the storm, then that the social workers and patients love that. First, they feel like it's a respect thing, and you're showing them the proper respect because a lot of these patients they do feel neglected or they feel like they're losing a lot of their identity because people have to take care of them. So I explain that to my employees that you have to show them that dignity, that respect. Because a lot of them are dealing with that right now, especially the men and women that worked all their lives and now they're in this place where they need help just to get around.
Yeah. Yeah, and doing, all of that communication to your employee and building that in, do you kind of build that conversation into the onboarding and do any kind of employee handbook? Is that all part of those intro conversations?
Yes, and again, a lot of this is learned behavior. Basically, we had to go through the fire and realize we have to implement things because there's a lack of accountability for people coming in late. One of the key things that I found to help me be successful with that is trying to incentivize people that are initially onboarded as part-timers to go full-time. So the full-time people, they have more incentives, right? We give quarterly evaluations for everyone, so that helps because people will know that they are the ultimate gatekeepers to their success, meaning that if they're going to get promotions or they're going to get raises. So knowing that tardiness is a huge factor in whether or not you get a raise is huge. So making sure that you explain that on the onboarding process, like you can determine how much money you make based on your attendance and your communication, right? So I drill that in. And then another thing that we like to express during our orientation is what happens to an actual patient, especially dialysis patients, if they miss one treatment. So if you know that you're responsible for that patient's mortality decreasing, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, okay, you're going to take that a little bit more seriously. So making sure that people understand the severity of what happens is key. So everything I'm telling you is things that help me become successful because sometimes even I didn't know the real importance to some of these meetings or doctor's appointments we're taking people to and realizing that they have to wait weeks or months or their lifespan just became a little bit shorter because they missed dialysis. So you want to express that and really drill that in. That in a combination of making sure that people understand on the other side is you're going to get rewarded for never coming late,
Yeah.
because you can be uh, counted on.
Yeah. It's
So
all, all the responsibility and the trust rolls downhill. If I can count on you, that means that the patients and the hospitals can count on me and that we all make more money and then promotions are coming your way. But I think that point too about, just really making sure they understand how, staying up too late the night before and deciding you don't feel like coming in, like what kind of impact that actually can make on someone's life. I think
yes.
that can go a long ways to really help minimize this problem in the business, or at least if they know they're going to be out, communicating it early enough where it's not going to impact anything in the business.
Yeah. So just to piggyback on that is when they communicate, we did implement part of our policy and procedures are, and I might be just going way ahead of myself, but we don't even allow text messages. You have
Yeah,
to verbally speak to someone. If you are going to be late, you have to give us 4 hours notice. Anything after 4 hours notice, we need a doctor's, something saying you went to the doctor. So give us enough time to fix the problem. So that's really key. If people know that they partied the night before, hey, you know what? I am not feeling like I'm going to make it. And I tell people I'm going to respect that because the biggest thing is the communication.
yep.
If you give me enough time to fix the problem before it's a problem, I love you even more as an employee. You know what I mean? Because everybody's going to call in. No one's perfect. Just give me enough time so I can stay ahead of this. And when people call the night before, it's a lot easier for me to call somebody from my standby list and get them mentally prepared to get on that truck that morning.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's perfect. Now I guess kind of on the flip side of the employee, do you ever have situations where your driver shows up and the patient cancels, at the door or while you're driving over? And how do you handle that?
So now, if we have a tight schedule, sometimes that works out great. Because if a
Yeah.
patient calls out, we can always say, "Hey, go pick up so and so and help another truck that might have a tight schedule." So it'll alleviate them, and of course, the employees will love it, right? But for particular patients, especially that are on dialysis, the protocol that we have set in place is that the employee has to call the supervisor, and the supervisor has to talk to the patient and find out why he or she does not want to go to dialysis. Because again, when we know the importance, you might have a patient that just is not up to it. They might be at that point where they're ready to give up.
Mhm.
There's plenty of reasons. They could be going through a depression, but sometimes when they speak to the owner, that will reinvigorate them and maybe you can convince them to go into dialysis. So that has happened on plenty of occasions. And I'll speak to the patient and say, listen, I understand you're not feeling up to it, but we'll have a conversation, let them know, hey, is there anything we need to do? Do we need to pick you up some breakfast? Is it something going on that we can help you with? And most of the times when I speak to the owner, you can convince them to go.
Yeah. And I'd imagine that's huge, probably both for the hospital and the patients in terms of feeling like they can, you're more than just a transportation company to them
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And you'll have patients that will ask, "Can you speak to my mom and dad and please tell them to get on?" And they'll listen to us. They won't listen to the family members, but they'll listen to us. So we'll do that. And if it's something where patient has canceled more than twice, then we'll call the nurse or we'll call the hospital and have the doctor speak to them. And
Mm.
sometimes, you have to go through this hierarchy for the patient to know the importance of them going. So even if it calls for us being late and to another patient, but we have to really spend time trying to convince that patient, we'll make that assessment at that day, but that's usually what it'll take. Because at the end of the day, without the patient, we're not a company.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. So that's the one side, the contingencies around the people. What about another scenario? So you're out driving, you've got a patient in the vehicle, and the truck breaks down on the side of the road. So what's kind of the thought process? How do you handle a situation like that?
First thing again is we call the patient, or if the patient's with us, of course, he knows, but we call the facility.
Mhm.
Maybe they could swap that patient's chair time with somebody else's chair time. But again, they love it when we tell them. And again, people will make accommodations for flat tires, right? So that's why your customer service is going to make or break you in this. If you're a likable person and you do, your due diligence by checking on patients and facilities, not just when things are going good or bad, but when things are going good, right? Seeing if they need your assistance. So making sure that you build a rapport with the social worker, the nurse, and letting them know, hey, we caught a flat, we might be running late. But again, if you build your schedule the right way, I'm not going to say that you necessarily should have enough room to change a flat tire, but maybe you have enough time where you're just 10, 15 minutes late, even 20, 30 minutes late, and not 2 to 3 hours. So communicating that effectively with your home base, with the patient's social worker or nurse, and letting your home base know what's going on. And again, if we have a standby truck ready, then my office admin and my lead EMT, that's where they'll come into play. And now we're just a few minutes late because they can jump on your standby truck, or you call a surrounding ambulance company in that area and see if they can assist. So
Yeah.
those are my two things. First, we call the hospital or the facility, and then we call back to our dispatch center and get somebody on a spare truck to go pick up the patient.
Yeah, I think that's what's huge, and you've said it every time. It does come down to communication, and the more of that you can do, the easier and smoother this will be. But yeah, if you've got those spare drivers and a spare truck that they can jump in and come pick it up, then because if you'll know pretty quickly if this is a fix that's going to take 30 minutes or if this is just going to be something where you have to get it towed and there's no way to fix it. Those types of situations you need to have some kind of other solution where that patient can still get there within a reasonable amount of time. So whether it's a spare truck or you've called another ambulance company to come help and pick up that patient, as much of that as you can, the better off you'll be to kind of maintain that brand and maintain that trust.
Yeah. And I think people might say it can't be that simple. But guys, to be honest with you, before I even started an ambulance company, I did a survey and I spoke to different social workers from different facilities. And I asked them, what is the major problem you're having with ambulance companies? And they say communication. People are just showing up with the patient late. So you have to really make sure that that's huge because even if you're late, if they could trust that you're going to communicate with them, that's part of your marketing right there. You are your brand, and your reputation will do more for you than any marketer will do.
Got it. Yeah. Now, have you found any scenarios where there are like mobile repair companies or units that are worth using, or is it generally that, in the time differential you're dealing with, it's better to just get another truck or another company out if it's going to be longer than 30 minutes or so?
Yeah, the best thing to do, honestly, is have that spare unit,
Yeah.
right? Then everything else you can fix later on. So if you are servicing, if you're using one truck all the time, then of course you need that second truck. And we've said this before. For every truck you use, make sure you have a spare truck that's just there to mitigate these type of situations, right? And so now the other thing that I found very useful is to make sure that you have at least three tow trucks that you're going to use, right? That can do the full service if it's a spare tire. But again, you're thinking most tow trucks, it's a 30 to 40-minute time before they get to you, right? So the having my rule of three, which is three tow trucks, three mechanic shops, and three auto body repair, and even three electricians that work in the automotive industry that can fix your lights and sirens when things go wrong has worked out because if someone can't take your truck, you got two other people that you can use that you've built a relationship with. But the biggest thing is, yes, there are mobile tire repair shops. Again, still, my main concern is getting to that patient. Because for a mobile tire place to get to you, you're still thinking over 30 to 40 minutes before they even get to you, right? And it could be where they're servicing someone else and you still got a 2 to 3 hour wait. So the biggest thing is, how do I fix this problem now? And that's the reserve truck.
Got it. Yeah. I think that
Yeah.
makes perfect sense. Now, you've talked a bunch of times in this webinar about how important it is to communicate and let them know if you're going to be late. How lenient do you actually find that these hospitals are? Like what kind of buffer are we talking that they allow? Like, yes, you've communicated, but you're 3 hours late. Do they still forgive you if you've communicated that?
Again, in hospital settings, it's very different because they definitely rely on you to remove that patient from a discharge room. And then hospitals are not as lenient because they're going to go to the next ambulance company on the list, right? Their job, like our job, like I said just now, is to get the patient to the facility. Their job is to get the patient to another facility or get them home. So they're happy with, okay, thank you for calling us, but we're going to go to the next person. And so with hospitals, you're going to find that they're less lenient. So if you don't have that relationship with the patient, you're only going to see them one time in your life. But with dialysis centers and wound cares and other facilities like nursing homes, you've built a rapport with that patient, and most likely the transportation department in that facility. Hopefully, if you did your due diligence, and they're a little bit more lenient because they know you personally,
Got it.
right? So that's huge as well.
And is it the same type of thing if it's not, a more serious event like a call out or a breakdown? If you just got traffic, is it still the same scenario?
Yeah. Still same scenario. You're looking now traffic wise. If you're not patient loaded, you're definitely going to call your dispatcher, your home center, and see if there's another truck available that probably just dropped off a patient and could go pick that uh, other patient up for you. So same scenario, different protocols for that. You always want to again communicate, but this time you're communicating with us, and then we'll make the necessary assessment on. We're going to call the facility, call surrounding ambulance companies, or either call one of our other trucks that might be ready or might be closer to that patient than you will be. So those are the things that we're going to do. And if not, all else fails again, we're going to go to that reserve truck that is at the headquarters to go pick that patient up.
Okay, so now another scenario to kind of talk through for people to be thinking about. So, most of the time we're talking about non-emergency dialysis. We're not trying to necessarily transport people who are having a critical medical incident. But what if one of the patients that you are transporting does have a critical incident? What do you do? What is kind of the thought process, the steps that you go through in one of those situations?
Okay, so in most states like Georgia, we still have to, because we're BLS, and if that patient is crashing or something is critical going on, we have to pull over and call 911, right? That's the state law. That's what we have to do. And that's in our personal protocols. So if our employees do not know what the state protocols are, we've adopted those same protocols and said, hey, this is what we have to do. So that's part of our orientation. And that is something that we definitely hammer down on so people can be aware. Now, even though we hire EMTs, you might have medics that work for you, right? Even though your skill set or their skill set is above what you're actually actual patients that you're transporting, they're still there and they're good people to have on your trucks, right? So I tell my employees to use their best judgment. If we're literally 2 miles down from a hospital and you know that the nearest fire department is 15, 20 minutes away, take that patient to the hospital, right? Because you have to do what's in the best interest of the patient. And sometimes what's in the best interest of the patient is not to just sit and call 911 because now the other ambulance can be stuck in traffic and you're literally 2 miles down from the receiving ER. So in that case, you're going to call the ER. You're going to let them know your status, the patient status, and how far you are, and you're gonna let them know your time of arrival, right? So, and then in the other situation, you're gonna sit there and wait for the other ambulance company to come, and they have to be equally or higher trained. So they have to be EMTs on the same level of your EMTs or medics, right? And you're gonna explain to them what's going on and transfer the patient care to uh, that receiving EMS company.
Got it. Uh, I guess just as this is kind of a side question, it's probably complicated. In a situation like that, do you still get paid for the trip? Okay. So if you have to transition the trip over to another company, then you will no longer get paid for the trip. So there's also
Yep.
that kind of judgment call to make too. The life
Yes.
of the patient, and also if you're close enough, you want to get them there to keep them safe. It might be worth it, but it also enables you to keep the revenue. So it's probably a balancing act, both legal and judgment that you kind of have to think through for those types of scenarios and state.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that would really depend on the type of insurance the patient will have too. Some insurance might say, you know what, we still deem this payable, and they might pay you, and other places will say no, he didn't get to the actual location he was going to. So, the whole purpose is to transport people that are going for treatment, and I can't necessarily say if every insurance company will pay for that or reimburse you for that transport, since in their eyes it wasn't completed.
got it.
But in the other scenario where you're taking a patient and they crash and you take them to the hospital, you still will get paid for that.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, and so what happens if it's a scenario where, you haven't even started transporting the patients yet, but your driver arrives and it appears that either, before or like as you're arriving at the house that patient has some kind of medical incident. Do you even put them on the truck? What do you do in those scenarios?
In that scenario, we're definitely calling 911. We're going to wait for the patient with the patient until 911 arrives.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
There should never be a time where a patient's going downhill and we're going to try to take the time to load them and get them in the back of the truck because usually by that time, the other ambulance company should be there.
Got
And
it.
that has happened to us before.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I imagine these are people who are higher risk of a lot of
Risk.
different medical conditions. So I'd imagine it has and it will. And so just knowing that's gonna throw a wrench in the schedule for the day, probably, and just being sure that you're
Yeah.
communicating that as we've talked about and changing your scheduling up accordingly.
And that's something that once that scenario happens and you do communicate it, everyone understands. You never ever get pushback from the facility because now, again, keep in mind that some of these people go to the same facilities over and over again. So everybody's focus changes from now the well-being of that patient rather than filling a seat, you know, at that point. So you should never get pushed back. Being late for a scenario, that's never happened.
Got it. Okay, that's good to know at least.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, so let's just talk about a last scenario here. So inevitably, depending on what part of the country you're in, you're going to have some kind of weather, whether it's snow, tornado, hurricane. How do you kind of decide if you are going to send your drivers out or not? You know, is it a your decision thing, or do the hospitals make the decision? How does that work?
It's combined, but usually we're open as long as everybody else is open, right? So we'll get a phone call, a fax, or email from facilities saying, hey, we're closed today, short outage, this, that. We're calling the patients to reschedule, and we'll let you know as soon as we get that schedule, um, you know, uh, completed. So, but in cases like that where we don't hear from other facilities, then if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and watching the weather and making sure, the first thing I'm doing is calling my crew that's coming in to come in early. Hey guys, tomorrow's supposed to be bad weather, and we usually communicate through our group internet portal, our website. So we communicate through that, and we let everyone know, hey, please come in an hour early. And again, yes, I know that's, we gotta uh pay for that, but again, you're either going to keep them an hour early or you're going to be late and keep them an hour later, right? So either way, you want to make sure that, again, people pay attention to how you run your company, and you'll notice the separation between your business and other ambulance companies if you're taking these steps. And people will call you, and social workers call you and say, "No, I seen it. You guys were on time during our worst moments." And
Hmm.
so, again, you're creating a great reputation for your company. So I just make sure that people come in early and stay ahead of the weather or, expected traffic delays if there's an event going on in the city. Then we're always making sure that we prepare a couple of days in advance.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. That makes sense. I think kind of it all comes back to communication, being proactive and making sure, especially if you know that the hospitals are going to be closed or down, that you've thought, that's going to obviously impact things. But yes, yeah. So that's good to know that there's some communication there, and you really try to. I mean, it's not a package; it's a person. So as
Yeah.
long as there's a possibility for you to deliver them, and the facilities are open, then most of the time you're out there.
Yeah, and your lead EMT should always, whoever's creating the schedule should always be mindful of events, football games, or, weather. That lead EMT or that supervisor should pay attention to that. And maybe not everybody's schedule will adjust, but certain people on certain routes, their schedule will adjust. So if I have someone going near the Mercedes-Benz Stadium and I know it's a Sunday or a Saturday football game, then of course I'm calling the dialysis center, calling the patient, say, hey, we are going to pick you up 15 minutes earlier due to a particular event.
All right, I think those are kind of all of the scenarios that I could think of ways that things could go wrong. I'm sure there are more, but Hans, that was great just kind of going through all of those, the thought process, the backup plans, the things that you have prepared and should have prepared in any of these businesses to make sure you can handle and stay on top of those types of events.
Thank you.
So just for everybody else, is just kind of a reminder, if you are, looking for ways to accelerate and jump into this space, all the problems aside, and then in having the right backup plans there are ways that you can work with both Route Consultant and Hans to learn about the space, work alongside him, whether you're starting a new business from the ground up or purchasing an existing one. You can work with us and have Hans on speed dial directly every week, help you set up and be successful in your business. And if you're still in kind of the learning phase, we do have a one-on-one training for free on our website that's live. But we also have our new investor summit for EMS. And so to think about it this way, that is kind of you can think about it, the digital training that comes with that as kind of the 201. Like, let's learn the kind of the next step of information from those training videos. But with the summit comes a workshop. And that's really what I want to emphasize, is that EMS summit comes with an in-person workshop that'll be at our office in Nashville, that is included with that price, because we want you to come out. We want to see you so that we can answer specific questions about your state, about your challenges, and help you either evaluate an existing listing or go through the steps to be set up properly as you begin your business. So all of those are options. We actually have our next one on March 28th, but we have them every couple of months in person in Nashville. So if you're trying to take the next step into EMS, that's typically the one that I recommend so that you can move forward with confidence and really decide coming out of that day whether or not it's the right fit for you. Other than that, like I said, there's lots of ways if you kind of already decided you're sprinting forwards that you can work with us directly. So if you have questions about any of that, reach out to our team directly at info@routeconsultant.com. And we'll be happy to point you in the right direction, get you set up and get you running. So other than that, Hans, thank you so much for being here today, for, again, always providing your expertise and providing, this type of info for our clients. I always appreciate having you.
Hey, I appreciate you for having me. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to helping as many people as possible.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Hans, and we'll see you next week.